Zombie Hunter is a 2013 Grindhouse-inspired horror action film directed by Kevin King. The film tells the story of Hunter, a lone wanderer scouring a post-apocalyptic US after a recreational drug called Natus turns its users into flesh eaters. The film was funded independently by production companies The Climax and Arrowstorm Entertainment. The film was shot with a very low budget, and subsequent extra funds were raised through Kickstarter to help the film's post-production. I was introduced to this film by a friend who found it in a second-hand DVD store and bought it based on the cover, along with the film having the star power of veteran cult actor Danny Trejo. He is all over the marketing for this film, so going into it I expected him to be the titular zombie hunter. However, with most low-budget films that manage to book a recognizable star that has a large financial pool, no matter their involvement, they are the star and the focus of the selling of the film. Trejo is in the film for around 20 to 30 minutes, and our actual main character is played by Martin Copping, a relative unknown. The film was shot on location in Utah, and I must say, considering the film's budget, they did a decent job of securing interesting locations and making the most out of the money they had available. The practical effects for the most part are convincing, and others can be forgiving considering the budget they had. They managed to pull in a special effects makeup artist who has worked on Hollywood productions like Hellboy, Men in Black, and the Underworld series. But all these things are relatively nullified if the story they are part of isn't very good, and that is where the problems with this film arise. They may have the locations, props, a notable star, makeup and special effects, artists, and CG effects, but if they are in service of a subpar story with cookie-cutter characters, and bland and often cringy dialogue, then it's all for nothing. The film is commendable. It was made independently on a very limited budget. The filmmakers from their Kickstarter campaign video do seem that they are passionate about the medium and are fans of the grindhouse genre. They were able to pull in a notable star, and completing the film itself is an accomplishment. But without further ado, let's get into the film and we can go through it step by step to see where this film goes wrong. The film opens with a quote read by Danny Trejo that is vague and has little to no bearing on the rest of the film.
Be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary the devil, as a roaring lion walketh about, seeking whom he may devour.
Great start. We then cut to a TV where a news anchor drops a load of exposition on us setting up a new drug called Natus, which for keen-eyed viewers is Satan backwards, and that its users are spreading, and it has a side effect causing them to become violent. I don't mind them doing this, as at least we get information and it's done in a way that doesn't feel forced as it's coming from a news broadcast. However, after having seen the film, it holds no bearing on the rest of the story, because how the apocalypse came about really doesn't matter to our characters. Also, this leaves no mystery as we're given all the information up front. We see the TV as being watched by an Elijah Wood lookalike.
Spread rapidly from the nightclubs to the streets and now in our children's schools.
Elijah Wood then proceeds to inject the drug onto his arm rather than in it. And this scene also sets up the film's obsession with pinks and purples in its colour palette. This is obviously linked to the colour of the drug, but it really clashes with the rest of the film's muted colour palette, as it's a stylistic choice and a bold one at that, but it doesn't really mesh well with their grindhouse approach to the film. As Elijah Wood begins to trip, we see on the news that one of the actors is ill, and then they cut to this angle of the guy throwing up, which makes no sense, as why would they have this angle set up if he wasn't throwing up? It would just be showing his shoulder with the rest of his head cut off of the frame. They could have at least had the camera jolt and follow him and then push in to give it this real world quality, otherwise this just strikes a viewer as odd. But the shot also doesn't have the rotating news network logo that the other shots did, so is it meant to be a rogue camera, or did they just forget to put that in for this shot? We then get introduced to the way the filmmakers choose to write their female characters, as completely passive individuals who choose to cheat on their significant others for no particular reason, and are basically there to look hot and have someone for the protagonist to pine over and save. And then Elijah Wood seems to think her boyfriend won't get mad if they have sex, which clearly he and basically everyone in a similar situation would have a problem with, and she, concerned, still goes along with it, asking if he is sure, as if she doesn't have much of a choice in the matter.
We're just having a little fun. I'm sure I won't get mad.
Are you sure?
Yeah, I'm sure.
And then, to make things worse, we get this very odd exchange where both parties are consenting, but they also hate each other, but then go along with it anyway.
Bastard.
Then, as the two are making out, Elijah Wood is revealed to be a flesh eater, brought on by the drug. But during the sequence, we never see the character change or become overcome by the drug. I'm also too distracted to go into this more, as through this scene of him biting the woman's tongue, you can clearly see that he is just biting his own tongue. We then cut back downstairs with the boyfriend, now awake, who can hear screaming, but seemingly doesn't care, along with the filmmakers who choose to have another awkward exchange on the TV, where the anchors are confused whether they are still on, but they already cut away for technical difficulties after the male anchor threw up, and have now cut back to live, so they would have been counted in to be told when they are live. We then get this jump scare title akin to The Cabin in the Woods, where the boyfriend is revealed to also be a flesh eater, and this poses so many questions about the drug. Why did he pass out after taking it and then turn into a zombie, whereas Elijah Wood turned into one a few minutes later? I know this is done so they can have different scares, but it helps to have an internal logic to the universe, otherwise there's no sense of tension if anything can happen the plot demands. However, all of this is for naught because nothing in these opening 5 minutes ever comes back to help the story. We see none of these characters again. The drug Natus comes up once near the end of the film, but after the title we jump to a year later where the world is a post-apocalypse infested with hundreds of flesh eaters, so this cold open is pointless, as the only thing it sets up, the drug, holds little to no bearing because it doesn't really matter how the people turn into flesh eaters. Even if they were just going for entertainment value and having a good tense opening with a kill before the title, it just doesn't work, as there is no tension, as we're given all the information up front, so we know that the guy's going to become violent and then kill someone. It's also so poorly handled, it just makes the whole thing a waste of time. The pink overlays return in the title card for 1 year later, and this time they don't make much sense as this sequence doesn't have anything to do with the drug. However, get used to seeing bright colours, because for the rest of the film we're in one of the most muted colour palettes I have ever seen. There are no colours in this film, just 90 shades of black and grey. I know they are going for a grindhouse effect, but even grindhouse films aren't this muted. But now we're introduced to our actual main character, Hunter, with a whip crack and some 2000s era emo music.
As long as we explain exactly what have we done.
He is possibly the most generic, stock, post-apocalypse character they could have come up with. He wears aviators, combat boots, and a leather jacket. He has a deep, gruff voice and a ragged style and drives a black muscle car. So he's basically a cheap imitation of Max Rokitansky from George Miller's Mad Max films. Hunter is a spirit-chugging badass who's trying way too hard to be cool, and by its nature, trying to be cool isn't cool. Looking past the lack of shaking of instruments in a car doing over 100 miles an hour, and the repeated shots with these movie maker transitions, Hunter, as our protagonist, has a voiceover role in this film, narrating his story in his badass growl.
150 miles per hour. At this speed, you wouldn't feel a thing. Out like a light.
He tells us he's doing 150 miles per hour, but the speedometer clearly doesn't go that high, and then proceeds to brake the car as we clearly cut to a shot of the car that was clearly only doing about 20 miles an hour in reality. We are then introduced to the flesh eater makeup in this film as Hunter runs into one of them on the highway, which isn't the worst I've seen. You can clearly see the mold that is over this actor's face in this shot from the seams and the differing skin tones on his face compared to his neck, but considering their budget, it's not too bad of a job. There are much worse things to complain about. Like this flesh eater getting an intercard like Hunter did, even though he's just about to be killed and has no relevance in the rest of this film. Are they going to do this with every flesh eater? Why didn't the dismembered head of a zombie in Hunter's car get one? Yeah, he has a dismembered head in his car. It's never explained, and I don't mind that. He's a weird guy, so that's all the explanation I need. The film then repeats another shot, as we are also introduced to the sound design for the flesh eaters. Now I know they aren't human, but they still have human voice boxes, so in theory they can only make sounds possible by a human. But they have these grunts and growls that sound like they're made from bears or lions. But don't worry, the film will distract you with this very real dog carcass that isn't just a kid's toy with some tubing in place to act as intestines. After a stock sound effect, we get a decently composed shot as Hunter faces off against the flesh eater. The two charge at each other, and this is where we find out that the flesh eater's blood is purple. Why does taking a purple drug make their blood purple? People who do cocaine don't have white blood. Also, even as a stylistic choice, it just looks bad. I thought at first it might have been done to avoid getting a higher certificated rating, but the film is meant to be a grindhouse film and also went straight to DVD, so what would be the point? Hunter's car is then having engine trouble, and he pulls over to check out what the problem is. His engine is full of flesh eater guts from the zombie he just ran over, and I would wonder why he would risk damaging his car in a desert during the zombie apocalypse just to kill one flesh eater. I know he's meant to be a badass recluse, but that's just idiotic. He proceeds to scrape some of the guts off the grill, and this seems to do the trick, and the car pulls into a petrol station. At the petrol station, we get more bland voiceover from Hunter.
Silence. Nothing but stone cold silence. At a place like this, that was always a bad sign.
This line makes no sense. It's the apocalypse, and so far we haven't seen anyone else. Of course, most places would be silent. Also, you're in the desert. There's not going to be many people around anyway, even if it wasn't the apocalypse.
Sometimes kicking the damn thing works. If not, you got the siphon hose. Pain in the ass. It's always nice to get lucky.
Voiceovers are mostly used to give our characters perspective on the events that are occurring to get more of an insight of our characters' inner thoughts. However, this film gives us no new information and just has the character talk, saying vague lines, probably because the writer thinks it sounds cool. Hunter then makes his way into the station to look around, where the voiceover then tells us that a zombie has been watching our hero.
It was only a matter of time. He's been watching me, waiting for me to come inside.
So now the film is trying to say that the flesh eaters have some mental capacity and are smart, but the last one just tried to fight a car. And also, if you knew a zombie was watching you, why would you go into the store? He proceeds to look around and gets jump scared by a zombie that he should have literally been staring at. Where was it hiding? Another zombie appears and he dispatches of the two relatively easily in a scene with no tension, and then proceeds to murder another load of zombies off screen. He then returns to the store to deliver this line.
Nothing puts a smile on my face like a midday massacre.
Then why aren't you smiling?
Tequila's also been known to put a smile on my face.
And he still isn't smiling. But that doesn't matter. What does is why the fuck is Tequila getting an intercard? Did the editor just get bored and decide to fuck about and no one noticed? Is Tequila a main character? Is it going to be a major plot point later in the film? It's a more interesting character than Discount Mad Max over here, who proceeds to talk about the papers as if they're still running.
Just eaters. Or as the papers call them, flesh eaters. I could be the only one left.
Flesh eaters are roaming the earth, eating people. Who the fuck is going to be working a printer press and distributing papers in the apocalypse? Also, what would there be to report on? I think a year into the apocalypse, people would have got the memo. Hunter leaves the petrol station, and the editor now decides that he wants to make a music video, as we get some vague setup of Hunter's past with a photo I can assume is of his dead wife and daughter, as another 2000s era emo song plays over an epileptic's worst nightmare.
Just like me. Crazy for you, baby. Yeah, I lost my mind.
However, this drunken trip down memory lane is interrupted by Hunter being shot through his windscreen and crashing his car, where he promptly dies and the film ends. Just kidding. We've still got another hour and 20 minutes left. Even though Hunter should have clearly seen the shooter, considering he's looking straight ahead at where the shooter had to have shot through, he is completely clueless, and he is dragged out of his car, falling in and out of consciousness through this weird editing choice that feels like it was a trailer idea that got mixed up in the film. We get a shot of a comedically large moon as we fade out and cut back to the next day. The film returns with its pink overlay with a projector clack running underneath and a grain overlay to give the impression that this was shot on film to go with its grindhouse influence. But everything is then taken away and we get straight back to normal, and we also switch perspectives to a new character, a new female character, Allison, who also suffers from the terrible writing as she has already fallen in love with Hunter, a man who she has literally just met and is currently unconscious.
But this one is different. A rolling stone. He looked like a troublemaker. I liked it. I've always wondered.
But if you thought she was bad, just wait for the introduction of the next female character. This is literally their introduction of this character, which kind of gives you an idea of what their purpose in this film is going to be.
Hey, handsome.
This is Fastlane Debbie, whose name we are told in some of the worst dialogue I have ever heard.
To arouse you.
What did you do to my shoulder?
You don't remember? You got shot.
You shot me.
No, why would I go and do a crazy thing like that? No. That's Lyle that shot you.
Lyle.
Mm-hmm.
How many of you are there?
Well, there's only one. Fastlane Debbie.
Hunter asks how many people are with her, and she replies that there's only one of her, but that isn't the question he asked. Also, Debbie likes to refer to herself in the third person as Fastlane Debbie, and while we're on the subject, what does that nickname even mean? Is she a fast lane as a euphemism, or does she like to be in the fast lane, or what? But we have more pressing matters, as after riding Hunter, Fastlane Debbie has decided that they are going to have sex, no questions asked. I know it's the apocalypse, and I'm glad she knows what she wants, but you've literally just met this guy. However, before they can get down to it, they are interrupted by Allison, who arrives carrying a can on a plate as if she's a waiter. Who does this? The two then leave the room to let Hunter rest. As Allison proceeds to massacre these sausages, she and Debbie then start an argument in an exchange that makes no sense.
Something on your mind, Debbie?
What the hell you think you're doing? I mean, he just shows up and you're throwing yourself at him?
What?
Don't play coy with me, Allison. I saw the way you looked at him.
Debbie clearly knows what she wants and isn't afraid to admit that, whereas Allison is more closeted in her attraction to Hunter. But then Debbie proceeds to slut-shame Allison, accusing her of whoring herself out to Hunter. This is exactly what Debbie was just doing. I think they're trying to go for this kind of hypocritical aspect to Debbie's character, which would be fine if this argument didn't seem so forced and out of character, not in their conflict but in what they are saying considering their different ideologies. We then meet the rest of the survivors: Jerry, a pilot, Allison's brother Ricky, Lyle, the guy who shot Hunter, and the film's best character, Father Jesus, played by the one and only Danny Trejo. Trejo comes in and just brings a breath of fresh air, having someone who can actually deliver these lines semi-convincingly, and then the film just kicks it into overdrive, where we get the best part of this film. Danny Trejo, shirt off, fighting zombies with an axe as dubstep plays, and Trejo roars at the camera. It comes completely out of nowhere. I thought I was fucking tripping. Why couldn't this just be the film? If this film was dumb, fun, and knew it was, this film would be a million times better. But it just plays it too straight and is trying to make me care about these characters, but doesn't give them anything interesting to do. Obviously except for Trejo. However, my enjoyment is ruined when Hunter returns to deliver this line.
You should be more careful. I got a real short fuse when it comes to inbreds.
Have you met many inbreds? The group sit down for dinner, and seeing the whole group together, I'm wondering how they even got together. It seems none of them get along, so why have they stuck together in the first place? Lyle delivers this beauty of a line.
He's only 12 years old, and he's running off to go squirting his shorts.
I'm 15, fat ass.
What? This dude's meant to be 15? He looks like he's 26. Also, why aren't any of these characters getting title cards? They're supporting characters that are going to be in the rest of the film. They aren't getting them, but a zombie that died 10 seconds after it was introduced and fucking Tequila do.
Are you the asshole that shot me? Why would you do something like that?
I thought she was one of them. I thought she was a flesh eater.
Why is no one else thinking he's a fucking idiot? How is a flesh eater going to drive a car? Hunter and Lyle continue to argue, still trying to act cool with this terrible dialogue, and they resolve their issue way too easily.
Tomorrow, early, you're taking me to my car.
What do you mean by early? I don't get up before noon. All right. I'll take you.
We also get another cliche when Debbie asks if Hunter has a name, and he says this.
So, stranger, what's your name?
I don't have a name. Not anymore.
Why would you get rid of your name? Like, I get you lost your family, but it doesn't make any sense. We get more terrible dialogue when Hunter calls the flesh eaters eaters, and Trejo says this.
Eaters. Is that what they're calling them these days?
It's not that absurd, he just shortened it by one word. He then goes on to say,
You've been here a while. How long?
Hell. It's hard to tell. 3 months maybe.
how could you lose track of time so easily? The whole apocalypse only started a year ago. We get more terrible writing of female characters, where Allison says that Ricky should never interrupt another man.
Eaters?
No, Zardy.
Ricky, it's rude to interrupt another man when he's talking. You know that.
Why can't we just have one female character in this film who isn't an object of desire or is completely passive? Why couldn't she just say you shouldn't interrupt people when they are talking? Are these writers so afraid that any red-blooded man is going to stop watching if a woman starts taking control? Do they think we're that fragile? Anyway, Trejo reveals the original plan was to get to a nearby airbase to fly away to.
I used to fly cargo from that airbase over the Pacific to Hawaii. There's a group of islands about an hour off the California coast. Completely isolated, never touched by man.
Yeah, I very much doubt there are islands just off the coast of California that we haven't been to. The film, however, does touch on an interesting idea where in a town near the airbase called Dahmer, which I'm assuming is in reference to the serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer, the people were running out of food and turned into eating the corpses of the dead flesh eaters, and in doing so become mutated and violent cannibals. This is an interesting idea that gave me similar vibes to the biker gang in Mandy. But instead of finding out more about this, everyone retires to their rooms as it grows dark, and we get another conversation between Hunter and Trejo where we get this exchange.
So tell me, what should I believe in?
Believe in good and evil. Believe that if you're not one, you're the other.
You really believe in that shit, huh?
Why are you surprised he is dressed as a priest and his room is covered in crosses? Allison joins in the conversation and Hunter considers killing the flesh eaters as a lifestyle, as if he has a choice. If you didn't kill them, they would kill you. But the three will go in their own ways, but not before Trejo delivers this line like Yoda for some reason. The next morning, Hunter takes Lyle out to his crashed car and we get this line.
You may need to order a few parts.
You're about to need a few parts, kid. Keep it up.
They're like the same age. Hunter goes to check out the wreck as Lyle manages to teleport 50 feet away to take a piss. Hunter realizes that the photo of his wife and daughter have disappeared, but before he can investigate, two zombies suddenly appear out of nowhere and attack him. They are in the desert with nothing around for hundreds and hundreds of miles. How in the hell are these zombies sneaking up on these characters? They should be able to see them coming literally a mile away. But these characters must be deaf as well as blind, as Lyle seems not to hear Hunter being attacked or the growling of flesh eaters. While being attacked, Hunter gives us this insight.
I could see it in his eyes. He was about to make a big mistake.
How in the world does a reanimated corpse show an expression on its rotting face with glazed over eyes? Anyway, Hunter dispatches the zombies easily and retrieves his photo from another zombie's guts, as he and Lyle head back to the compound, when we see they're followed by this. Why the fuck is a roided out orc in this film? The flesh eaters make sense, but how in the hell does a human turn into this? If they wanted to give some exposition, why not give some exposition to how this thing came about? Because I have no idea. It's a terrible character design and it's very poorly composited into the film. Also, it comes out of nowhere. There's been no hint to this of there being further mutations, or that these creatures even exist in this film. Back at the compound, Lyle's become Hunter's biggest fan, where he delivers this weirdly structured line.
I bet you he's killed a baker's dozen today alone.
You have been with him all day, so you would know how many people he has killed, and the term baker's dozen just feels weird in this context. Debbie then leaves the room and puts on a tape and re-enters the room as the guys' faces drop for no reason, as she hasn't done anything different to her appearance, as these guys have been with her for 3 months, so why are they surprised? This feels like an editing mistake, and this shot should have come when she begins to pole dance, as this makes sense for their faces to drop. Also, this pole dancing comes out of nowhere, like everything in this film, and there is no hint that Debbie is a pole dancer, and I believe this choice either came because it was on the actor's resume, or the directors felt that this was integral to the story. Allison then storms out the room and Hunter follows her as the other two continue to leer at Debbie. Outside, Hunter and Allison kiss, and this leads to one of the most awkward sex scenes I have ever seen. If this was intentional, then they have done a brilliant job, but this line from Allison begs to differ.
He didn't even say goodnight. Bastard. But he sure knew what he was doing.
Nothing in the last minute it showed that Allison enjoyed this encounter in the slightest. But in the other room, we get this awkward cut.
So you think she's prettier than I am?
As Debbie and Lyle talk, and then the two begin to strip, but before Lyle can get some, he is attacked by another one of those ninja zombies who punches his hand through Lyle's stomach, but he only starts screaming when bitten by the flesh eater. Once again, our female characters are completely useless and just scream as Debbie rushes out into some terrible day for night footage as Allison and her head back into the compound, followed by this cliched violin sound.
Where's Ricky? I don't know, but we gotta go!
Inside, Ricky has snuck into Lyle's room to find his porn stash. Allison, now in the compound, shouts for Ricky. He hears her screaming, but chooses to ignore her and closes the door. Now, once again, I know what they're trying to do. I get it, he's a teenage boy, and this is his prerogative. But he is living in a world infested with flesh eaters, and his sister is screaming his name, which I think he would take notice of, no matter how horny he is. Ricky is subsequently attacked by a flesh eater, and Allison leaves Debbie and Jerry to help him, and as she leaves we get this line. Back in the room, Ricky is fighting the worst zombie ever that had plenty of times to bite him, but didn't. Allison finally does something proactive and kills a zombie, but this is ruined by this terrible catchphrase.
Hey! Oh, you think that's funny? Nobody laughs at Allison. Nobody.
Hunter finally comes around and the group come together to escape the compound, where on the way out, Hunter decides to headbutt a flesh eater, which is probably the dumbest thing to do. But who cares, because the greatest matchup of the century occurs when a shirtless, axe-wielding Danny Trejo goes up against one of the mutated flesh eaters. Trejo manages to cut off one of his arms, but it retorts by knocking his head clean off, and the film gives us one funny visual gag that I think was intentional, with Father Jesus dying on his knees, still in a state of prayer, while headless. The group leave the compound and we cut back to them now pulled over as Hunter describes his injuries in his droll voiceover.
A few broken bones, gunshot wound, most likely infected, and a hangover from hell. I'd be fine.
Where did the broken bones come from? Because if they came from the car crash, I very much doubt he would be walking around. The film then steals a line from Lethal Weapon.
I'm getting too old for this shit.
And then Allison and Debbie begin to bitch at each other again, which seems like confrontation for the sake of confrontation, and going on the idea that women just despise other women, with the catalyst being both sexual attraction to Hunter. This is a problem when the driving force for any interaction or action of the female characters is in the aim of getting with Hunter. The group decide to head for the army base going through the town of Dharma, and the scene ends with another pointless shot in pink and another fire transition. While in the car, we get the weirdest scene with so many delayed reactions and poorly delivered lines.
Here, put this in.
Just put it in?
Yes, just put it in.
Just like that.
Yeah, just like that. What are you doing? Ew! God. I'm not some skank like your sister.
I'm sorry, I just...
You just what? I swear, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, does it?
While Ricky continues to perv on Debbie, Hunter and Allison begin a lover's spat.
Hey. Hey, I know you can hear me.
Of course he can hear you, he is 2 feet away. We then get this line from Allison in a voiceover for no reason as You meant to use this to give insight into the character, but we already know this, so it's just pointless.
You really don't remember, do you?
The group arrive in Dharma and begin to look around at the deserted town. They find a shop where Rookie looks inside a freezer and the contents cause him to throw up. The rest of the group then look inside, leading to them all throwing up as well. This is meant to come across as a comedic scene, but as there is no hint to what is in the freezer, them throwing up at something disgusting just makes sense if they had an extended scene, so each one went up separately and then threw up and it could have worked. However, while they were throwing up, their van disappears, even though it is right outside, directly in front of them, and they didn't hear anything. The group decide to split up to look for the truck. Here, we get another attempt at comedy where Hunter leaves the group and Allison assumes he's deserting them, but the setup is so poorly done.
Hey! Hey! Don't act like you can't hear me, okay? Whether you like it or not, we're all in this together. So where the hell are you going?
We need the truck. I'm looking for the truck.
Oh.
They keep putting in these jokes but never committing to them, so they always just come across as awkward and unfinished. So, Allison and Hunter go to inspect a mysterious house, leaving Jerry, Debbie, and Ricky outside. Debbie then decides to wander off to pee, which is one of the laziest ways to get someone to separate from the group and then to be killed off. And to no one's surprise, she is then stalked by a mysterious stranger, and then hears a non-diegetic sound.
Damn it, knock it off! I'm not in the mood for your game.
Back in the shack, Allison and Hunter continue to investigate, when they find some words drawn in blood on the wall, along with severed heads, and we get this line from Allison.
What does it say?
Are you illiterate? It's literally in bold English. Back with Debbie, we get some very integral plot, as we get this very poorly staged chase scene. Debbie is screaming the whole time, and the killer is constantly about 10 feet behind her, and then when she stops and hides, he's nowhere to be found. How could he lose her when he's literally behind her? Debbie is then unsurprisingly killed, and the killer presents her severed head to the rest of the group. Allison goes to shoot him and proceeds to aim in the only place where he's wearing armor.
Deb, is that? No way, man. No way.
Nice job. The group then run away and the killer tosses the head at Ricky so hard that he gets knocked over.
Ricky!
This killer must have a great pitching arm because he threw that head like 100 foot in a millisecond. Ricky is so useless. He needs help from his sister to get up, and the killer then chases Ricky and Allison. Through all of these shots, it's clear that the chainsaw isn't moving and the audio is being put in post. While being chased for about 15 seconds, Ricky complains about being tired.
Ricky, come on!
Allison!
What are you doing? Come on!
I'm tired!
Come on, hurry up!
What's the more pressing matter, that your legs are a little tired or dying? Ricky is completely incompetent, and especially in this sequence, he can't even walk on his own and has to be dragged along by Allison. Talking of Allison, she just shrugs off being cut by a chainsaw and is cornered by the killer, until he's run over by Hunter in the truck, who then takes his chainsaw and cuts him in half. Then the film attempts a joke again and completely falls on its face again. Jerry appears and says this.
Hey, what the hell's going on over there?
You saw the crazed man with a chainsaw. This joke would have worked if he had just walked into this crazy situation with no context, but he literally saw everything. You were standing there with the rest of the group. They then leave the town of Dharma, and I'm wondering why they even stopped in the town. It was deserted, and they could clearly see that. There was nothing stopping them and made them get out of the car. They could have just driven through the town straight into the army base, and the sequence occurred for basically no reason but to have an action scene. Anyway, Allison and Hunter are driving, and Ricky and Jerry have just disappeared in this scene unless they're lying down on their backs in the boot. In this scene, we get a semi-payoff for the opening sequence and the drug Natus. Hunter reveals his past.
I got some skeletons in my closet. There's a lot in my past I'm not proud of.
Injections? When was the last time?
Almost a year. I'd got enough work early, and me and the boys, we went to get a drink. You know, we had a little extra time, so why not, you know? That's how I used to think back then. Never mind the family back home. You know, that's how it always started. Just one drink. Before I knew it, I was wearing the lampshade. I was shooting up anything, everything I could get my hands on. That night it was Natus. That was my first time. I never made it home.
But this makes no sense, as it's implied the Hunter was shooting up with Natus, but then wouldn't he have turned into a zombie? The film can't even follow its own rules that it set up in the first 5 minutes. They also describe it in a way where it sounds like the apocalypse occurred overnight. It's a nice idea to have Hunter blame his forthcomings for the death of his family, as it flaws his character, and then it links to the outbreak. But this comes way too late with 20 minutes left in the film. Allison's voiceover then comes back where she states she wants to have him.
That's when I knew I would never have him. I would never have a piece of his heart. He didn't have one. It was taken from him. Gone. Forever.
However, everything that she has done since they had sex has shown that she doesn't like him, and she has called him a bastard and a son of a bitch. The only thing this film has done to show an attraction between the two is purely physical, and something that was done under the influence of alcohol. Her interest comes completely out of left field, like, yeah, he saved her from the crazed man, but he saved her a couple of other times. What makes the difference this time? Also, they literally met yesterday and have had one meaningful conversation, and that was exactly 1 minute ago. The group then arrive at the army base.
Stone cold silence.
This is like the 5th time he has said this line. It's not cool, it's a very jumbled line that doesn't even make sense. What the fuck is stone cold silence? No one in the world has ever said stone cold silence. It's dumb. Why do they choose this as his catchphrase? The group find a plane as Hunter looks around the hangar for no reason. The plane's engine starts, and for the first times, the zombies sneaking up on the group makes sense, as they wouldn't be able to hear them because of the engine running. Jerry is pulled out of the plane as he calls for help from Allison and Ricky, who just sit in the plane and watch him be eaten alive. We then cut to Hunter, who just stands there watching the Fletch Eaters surround the plane, and from this angle I wonder how Hunter didn't see any of them coming. Ricky and Allison escape the plane and head over to the hangar with Hunter, and they hide in the back room, seemingly trapped. They find a secret stash of guns and decide to go out shooting, but for no reason Hunter takes away Ricky's gun.
Who's ready to kick some ass? What are you, retarded? Put that thing down.
As long as he isn't pointing it at you, he could kill a couple of Flesh Eaters. They also try and wrap up Hunter and Allison's arcs, but the dialogue is just cringy and just overall poorly done. Ricky and Allison make it back to the car, and Hunter decides to stay behind to confront one of the mutated Flesh Eaters. He doesn't have much reason for doing this, and could have escaped with the other two, but he's the hero, so he's got to make the sacrifice play. However, Ricky and Allison encounter another mutated Flesh Eater that Allison decides to attack with the car and run it over. Yep, that's not going to work. Once the front wheels went over the creature, it would lift off the ground. As Hunter confronts the mutated Flesh Eater, the scene just becomes a repeat of the Danny Trejo death scene. Hunter gets impaled by the mutated Flesh Eater and drops a grenade to kill it and himself, which then proceeds to explode, and yeah, that was a grenade, not a missile strike. Ricky and Allison drive off and we get this line from Allison's voiceover.
That was the last time I ever saw the hunter alive.
Yeah, that's 'cause he's dead? That's what happens when people die? But that's not the end. The film decides to reveal that Hunter is still alive, but then decides to kill him off again and the credits roll. That's how you choose to end your film? Zombie Hunter is a bad film, and proves that even if you have a decent budget and a notable star, the thing that matters most is story. Even though the film is stuck in the cliches of the zombie subgenre, it has some interesting elements that, if they were explored, could have given us a decent and enjoyable film. But because those behind the film have this admiration for grindhouse films and the stilted nature of those films, it just gives us a completely disjointed final product. Visually, it's bland, the acting is subpar, they have some decent practical effects, but they're overlooked for the terrible digital ones. The director Kevin King did direct another feature called Cyborg X 3 years later in 2016, but hasn't directed or worked on any other projects since. His co-writer Kurt Knight has had more success working on 2 TV series and 2 films after this, both writing and directing them. Danny Trejo has been making steady work as he always has, and even starring in Cyborg X, and currently has 383 acting credits, which averages out to working on over 10 films for the past 30 years he's been in the industry. Our 2 main stars, Martin Kopping and Claire Niederprum, have both had steady work for the years after making this film, and I'm happy that these people are still working in the industry, as I think they all have the potential to be decent actors, and at times it feels like they just aren't getting clear direction, which also isn't helped by the poor script and the lines that the best actors in the world couldn't pull off convincingly. If you're looking for a so bad it's good film, then I would recommend this film if you're with a couple of friends and a couple of beers and you want to laugh at something bad. Then sure, put this on, but only under those circumstances. But that's just my opinion. Feel free to place yours in the comments below and tune in each week for new episodes.
Thank you.